Welcome, friends, to this bonus episode with my good friend Samuel Sey, who is a blogger, and he's going to be speaking as our keynote at the Day of Action on June 23 and 24 here in Columbus. And Samuel was born in Ghana, West Africa. He moved to Canada when he was 10 years old. And this is where the pro-life piece comes in, doesn't it, Samuel? Where your father suggested that he was of the opinion that you shouldn't have been born. He would rather you not. He walked out on you. So I guess that was the beginnings of your understanding of how important the pro-life issue is. And of course, he's a former staffer of the Canadian Center for Bioethical Reform, which is one of my favorite organizations in North America. So, Sam, thanks for coming back on. Um, I want to dive back in here where we left off. I'm going to read a comment from Clark Forsyth, who's, I think, a pretty strong thinker and writer on this topic. He's the president of Americans United for Life. He's written a book called Politics for the Greater Good. And I would suggest this to anybody that's interested in this debate between incrementalism and immediatism or abolition or however you want to call it, all or nothingism. I don't really care how it's talked. Uh, if you're interested in getting the inside mind to the incrementalist point of view, this book is the best. It's Politics for the Greater Good. And there's a quote in it that I think really kind of summarizes the incrementalist point of view. And it's one that I subscribe to, and that's this. He says, quote, "Because we live in a world of constraints, prudence tells us that if we cannot prohibit a social evil entirely, we can limit it through appropriate fences." So he refers to fences, and you can get the visual there, right? Building fences around a social evil as part of a larger strategy to secure justice precludes what can be prohibited now without admitting to the legitimacy of what remains prohibited. And that's what's so important that people understand. We're not saying when we ban abortion at a heartbeat or 15-week, whatever it is, that we're saying all the other ones that are allowed or continue to be allowed because of the current status of the law in America that we condone. We don't. But it goes on to say, but limiting the harm done or lessening the negative consequences, we do not admit or support the rest of the evil that we do not have the power legally or politically to touch right now. I mean, I couldn't say it better. I think that's the position of the pro-life movement as a whole generally, and it has, in my view, brought down Roe v. Wade. I mean, you cannot argue if Roe goes, it was incrementalism that brought it down. It's a 15-week ban on abortion in Mississippi. It's the heartbeat bills. It's all these bills that have been passed over the last decade that the U.S. Supreme Court had to pay attention to. And finally, given the makeup of the court, it looks like they're going to overturn Roe v. Wade. So that's, to me, I don't see how you can beat that evidence. So I just want to talk to you about that because I've always been what I call an and both person. I've supported abortion bans. I was part of that in 2006 here in Ohio when we introduced the first abortion ban. But I've also supported some incremental bills, not all, but some. And part of it's just because of the matter of time and resources. We're not a political group per se anyway, and we just have limited resources. We got to pick our battles. But I'm not crazy about a lot of these bills, but I can tell you this: the heartbeat bill was well worth our effort, and it really changed the landscape politically in America, and in part led to possibly overturning Roe. So I know that you've written on this when your current blog piece, "Why I'm Not an Abolitionist on Abortion." They use the term abolitionist. They say that they're the modern day abolitionists, they're abortion abolitionists, and they pattern themselves supposedly off of historical abolitionism. You take a little issue to that.
Yeah. Um, it's incredible that they take the name abolitionist, but frankly, they're not at all like them at all. They might be closest to maybe William Lloyd Garrison, maybe, but not for
They like
good
to
reason.
cite him, no doubt.
Yeah, but they're so they are an explicitly Christian anti-abortion movement. So they
Mhm.
oftentimes like to try to claim Wilberforce as well. But the abolitionists were absolutely not, they were not the kind of abolitionists that these anti-abortion abolitionists are. That like see, the original abolitionists were, I would say, very much like you and me, in that they were immediatists in principle, like we all are. They want
Mhm.
to ban abortion, or I should say, in a slavery immediately. The way we want to ban abortion immediately. Now, unfortunately, just like within their movement, not every anti-abortion, pro-life person is truly wanting to ban abortion. Just like as it was in their time, especially with politicians like Henry Dundas
Mhm.
in the UK, in Britain. He was supposedly anti-slavery, but he himself was not really keen on banning it very fast. So he delayed the slave trade ban for about 10 years. So they model themselves after or they claim they do, to model themselves after the abolitionists, but they are not, as I would say, as wise as they were, in that they wanted to ban slavery immediately, but they were willing to do whatever they can to rescue as many slaves as possible until they could ban all slavery, which is why they banned the slave trade first. And then it took them about 30, 40 years, at least when Wilberforce joined the battle, before they could ban the slave trade. And then another 30 years or more before they could ban slavery as a whole. And that is what has been helping us, grow in banning abortion in this country. And frankly, a lot of social movements, like the civil rights movement, learned from the original abolitionists in being incrementalists. They knew that
Mhm.
frankly, it is foolish to think in a world that is completely against what you're fighting for, that you can start from, all or nothing. No, it doesn't work. It's never been able to work. You have to slowly, incrementally, gradually, step by step, frankly, negotiate with people that you disagree with before you can fully convince them to join your side.
Right, and they would take issue to the idea that they're an all or nothing,
Yeah.
point of view, okay, that's fine. But I wish we would just get past this whole conversation of say you have the immediatists here and the incrementalists here. We're all incrementalists. We just are.
Yep.
Even the abolitionists are incrementalists in
Yep.
that they are deploying a state by state strategy. They're
Yep.
not trying to ban abortion nationally. They're not trying to outlaw abortion globally. And if they
Hmm.
were truly an immediatist, they would want abortion ended all across the country all at once and
Yep.
all across the world. But they're doing it state by state. Now, they would say that's because we have a federal system. And I'd say, okay, that's fair enough. I mean, that's the way to go about it. With you. But it does bring up the question. And I have brought this up before with them. And that is, if you ban abortion in Oklahoma, but you don't ban it in Kansas, do you value babies in Oklahoma more than you do in Kansas? Isn't that
Yep.
partiality, as they would say? Isn't that valuing some babies based on their geography versus others based
Yep.
on their geography? To me,
Yep.
that's incrementalism. Let's all get past it and say we're all incrementalists. We all want the same thing. Let's try to work together to get this done. I'm afraid
Exactly.
we're not gonna be able to get there, but I'm one that would love to see that happen.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I've asked abolitionists that same question, and they will oftentimes bring up, well, this federalist, which frankly I think is a convenient answer to the
I
very
mean,
issue.
it's a plus of our system. There's no question. We're set up
Yes.
that way, and that's a
Yeah.
good thing. But
Yeah.
if we weren't and America was just one big country, you know, what would you do?
Yeah.
They do
Well,
it
well,
because here's the thing. They do it because it's pragmatic to do it. They know they can't ban abortion at the federal level. They can't get the
exactly.
Congress to do it. They won't get a president to sign it. It's been
Exactly.
tried and failed.
Exactly. And then to your point about them, all abolitionists being incrementalists, as I mentioned in the article, a lot of, not every abolitionist, but a lot of abolitionists voted for Donald Trump. That's an incrementalist move. Donald
Mhm.
Trump is not an abolitionist. The argument,
Not at
in the
all.
article, I described a lot of abolitionists as the anti-abortion never Trumpers. Now, I don't want to shame anybody who didn't think they should vote for Trump. That's fine. But the never Trump movement is basically no. It's never justifiable to vote for someone like Donald Trump just because they are better than Hillary Clinton. Well, a lot of people would say, well, look, they don't like a lot of things about Trump. He's not ideal. He's not perfect. But you know what? If we vote for him, he might be able to do something for the pro-life movement. And look and
Mhm.
behold what has happened since then.
Yeah.
Okay? And that was an incrementalist vote. And not every abolitionist did, but a lot of abolitionists voted for Donald Trump. Well, why? He's not an abolitionist. He's not a Christian. He's not a man of ideal character. He is a fallen human being. And frankly, while I think I admire a lot of what he did for the pro life movement, but I think a lot of it was also a pragmatic move for him.
Of course it
I'm not
was.
completely sold that he is as pro life as you and I are, and yet we voted. A lot of people voted for him because we know that it would be good for the country. So then, why then can't you do the same thing about pro-life incrementalist bills?
Right. Well, the abolitionists I know didn't vote for Trump, but there are plenty that did.
Yeah,
And the point of the matter is now, and of course, nobody had a crystal ball exactly, but Donald Trump's the reason why Roe's being overturned. I mean, it
yeah,
is. You can't point to any other reason other than that. And you can give the pro life movement credit for supporting Trump and helping him to get into the White House for certain. But without Donald Trump, there is no overturning of Roe. Just you can't separate the two. And in some ways, the pro life movement doesn't even deserve overturning Roe because Donald Trump was the reason mainly. Now they did the right thing by voting for him and supporting him and fighting for 50 years, and I give them and us credit for that. But the Trump presidency is the reason why we have an overturning of Roe versus Wade, and people need to just come to grips with that, as never Trumpers should, and just say, "Hey, listen, I was wrong. I was wrong. It was right to put him into office," and so it
yeah,
should be with some of our abolitionist friends. I'm
yeah,
trying to bridge the gap here. Now that over if Roe is overturned, we're all going to be fighting at the state level. I don't want to fight with them. I don't want to fight with people that
yeah,
disagree with me. I think we ought to come together and try to figure out how to move the ball together forward together.
yeah,
And I'm afraid that's not going to happen. But I'm not going to stand in the way of bills that ban abortion from the beginning, and also would treat the unborn with equal protection. I'm just not going to
yeah.
do it,
I,
and I
I
think that's the
completely,
position the movement should take.
I agree with you. I say that in Canada, I am a so-called incrementalist. Um, in Oklahoma, Louisiana, Ohio, which is now my state, I am an abolitionist because some states are different. Like I said,
They
context
are.
matters, right? And I think you can and as I said in the article, uh, people wouldn't say I'm an abolitionist, but I would say that yeah, well, I am. I want to abolish abortion, but I have a different strategy than some other people, and yet they are my allies. I love them. Unfortunately, many of them will not consider you and I their allies. In fact, some of them
No.
will say we are a bigger problem than even the abortion advocates.
Planned
But
Parenthood, yeah.
yeah, but yet, I admire them for a lot of the things they're passionate about. And I've learned a lot of things from them. But what concerns me, as you said about this division, is we have the so-called, from womb to tomb pro-life people. We have a lot of pro-life people who don't believe that preborn babies should receive justice in terms of criminalization, or their killers being penalized. And then, unfortunately, you also have the abolitionists who think that while they wouldn't say it this way, that the all nothing approach should be the only way. And there's so much division, at a time when we have an opportunity to really bring justice for preborn babies. And it's really
Mhm.
concerning.
It is, and I'm glad that, and again, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but if Roe is overturned, that eliminates one of the areas of division where they would say you're defy Roe, just ignore it. I'm glad pro-lifers didn't ignore it for the last 50 years. I can tell you that. I'm
Mhm.
glad that they elected Donald Trump, and Donald Trump put 3 justices on the Supreme Court that turned the tide on
Mhm.
Roe. So I'm
Mhm.
glad that we didn't defy, we didn't deny, we fought within the system, admitting and openly saying that Roe is not law, that it is not, it's just an opinion of the US Supreme Court. It's not constitutional right. We made that case for 50 years. But hopefully, now that Roe's out of the way and we're at the state level, we can agree that we need to ban abortion and we can work towards it together. I want to bring up another argument that we hear often from our friends on the abolitionist side of the aisle, which unfortunately there is such a thing,
Hmm.
and that is that, and this is the argument that I heard over and over again during the heartbeat bill here in Ohio, where there's 8 years of this going on, and they would say this. Say for an heartbeat bill, for an example, they would say, "Well, it's not enforceable. It's not enforceable because the abortionist or the person performing the ultrasound can simply just move the ultrasound monitor to wherever they want and not detect the heartbeat, and therefore go ahead and perform the abortion." And to that, I said, "Well, yeah, okay, that's possible, I guess, sure, but isn't it true of every law that we pass? Uh,
Hmm.
that you pass a law, you're trying to require people to follow it. So if you
Yeah.
take the notion that we shouldn't pass laws because people will break the law, that's not a good reason to not pass the law, because
Yeah.
that's what the pro-choicers say. They say,
Yep.
"Well, if you ban abortion, people are gonna do it anyway." I can
Yeah.
tell you this, I'm not gonna make that argument. That's exactly what the abolitionists make on heartbeat bills and others who are not total bans. They'll say, "Oh, well, they're just gonna break the law anyway. The abortionists are liars, they're murderers, therefore they're not gonna follow the law." Well, that may be true to a certain degree, but that's not a reason not to pass the law. We need to enforce the law, just like
Yep.
any law, whether it's a ban or whether it's a partial, an incremental law. So I don't know why abolitionists are making the pro-choice argument that if you pass a law, they're going to break it anyway. What's the point?
It's unfortunately, and this is going to offend many people if they're not offended already. They're making the similar argument because unfortunately, just like the pro-abortion advocates, they see the pro-life movement as their enemy. And this is not just me saying it. Like
That's interesting. I've never
there are
looked at it
many,
that way.
yeah, there are many groups, many abolitionist groups that do say that the pro-life movement is the biggest problem in the abortion issue. Not Planned
Mhm.
Parenthood, not the abortionists. It's the pro-life movement. Therefore, they will borrow some of the, even if it's unintentional, they will start to parrot because, in some
Hmm.
sense, the old proverb is the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and that's a harsh statement in many ways, but it's a reality where, oftentimes a lot of the arguments that they're making is very similar to, sadly, what the abortion advocates say.
Yeah, and I'm not sure they're doing it intentionally. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I don't know, but they certainly are making that argument when they say heartbeat bills are going to be violated because the abortionist or the ultrasound tech's not going to detect a heartbeat. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, that's not a good reason. I mean, that's like saying if you ban abortion, women are going to go into the back alleys. I mean, it's the same problem.
You
We
know,
need to enforce the law, even if it's hard to enforce. And let me just say this. I've interviewed a former abortionist on this, and I asked them, if you were an abortionist today and a heartbeat bill was passed in your state, what would you do? And despite what most people believe about abortionists, most of them won't break the law. They won't. Look what happened in Texas. They're
yeah,
shutting down.
yeah,
Look
yeah,
what happened, I think, in Oklahoma. They closed a bunch of abortion mills just because this bill was passed. It's not like
yeah,
they're going to overtly defy the laws and risk their licenses, because a lot of these aren't just abortionists, they're OBGYNs. They want to keep their credibility and their license in the medical profession. So just to say, "Oh, they're murderers, they're gonna break the law anyway," is a lousy argument, I think, because I
yeah,
think they're going to try to follow the law as best they can, and we've seen that with other laws that they pass. Sure, people are gonna break the law, but they're gonna do that with anything. A law is no guarantee that you're gonna zero out a behavior. All you're gonna do
exactly.
is build a fence around it to try to restrain it. That's all these laws are all about, whether you ban abortion or you restrict it.
Exactly. Including, as you suggested, even the abolitionist bill, even a ban, even a bill that would ban all abortion. You're still going to have some people who might want to break it. That's just the nature, unfortunately, of human nature. You
Correct.
see that with murder today. It's illegal to murder anybody. It still happens.
Mhm.
And again, I keep mentioning the original abolitionists because I want to explain to people how inconsistent the modern, so-called modern abolitionists are to the original abolitionists. In that the arguments that, well, if you have an incremental bill, well, it would just, it would, people will break it. Well, that was the argument that some pro-slavery people were using against the abolitionists. The original, they were saying,
Mhm.
"Well, guys, if you ban the slave trade, well, it would just create an underground slave trade." That was the argument. So it's bizarre that the so-called abolitionists today are embracing the arguments from the enemies of the original abolitionists, the same
Mhm.
way they're embracing the arguments from the enemies of the pro-life movement today, being the abortion advocates.
Yeah, and real quickly, I want you to just delve into William Wilberforce. I know that there's, those on the one side, abolitionists say that he was a absolutist, an immediatist, and there's others that say he's an incrementalist. And some are trying to revise history here. I think the evidence is clear that he was incremental. If you would kind of share your view of that as much as you have understood the history
Uh,
of the abolitionist movement, because I think they want to adopt him as a poster child for
oh
their
yeah,
position.
yeah. A good friend of mine mentioned that whoever whoever can have the strongest argument for proving whether Wilberforce was immediatist, or like the way the abolitionists are or claim they are anyways, and then or the incrementalists like us, whoever can prove where Wilberforce really stood wins the argument. Because rightly, we lionize Wilberforce as we should. Um,
Mhm.
well, the
Yeah.
issue is there are a lot of abolitionists who have some quotes from Wilberforce, and Wilberforce is using strong words about gradualists within the abolitionist movement, and they claim that Wilberforce was really talking about so-called incrementalists within the abolitionist movement against slavery. But that's not what he was really addressing. He was addressing people like Henry Dundas, who I mentioned his name before, who was a British politician who claimed he was against slavery. But at every turn, while he would support bills to end the slave trade, he would delay it up to 10 years, right? Now, there are, as we've said, there are people in the pro life movement today that we acknowledge that they don't really want to ban abortion. But it's not that they are gradualists or incrementalists as a problem. It's that they don't really want to ban abortion. That's what sorry, that's what Wilberforce was addressing in some of his quotes. He was not addressing some of his friends. He was not addressing himself. He was addressing people who did not really want to ban the slave trade or slavery. Right? But he
Mhm.
himself was an incrementalist. As I mentioned, he supported bills to limit the number of slaves on slave ships. He supported bills or motions to limit the number of slaves that could be sold at a shipping port. He himself banned the slave trade before he would ban slavery. His main goal was to ban slavery, but he knew it was impossible at the time. He knew that all he could do was ban the slave trade first, and then when the culture at the time in Britain was more had become more anti-slavery by the slave trade ban, then he could move them towards banning slavery as a whole.
Well, in order to finish up, I want to be an equal opportunity offender. So we're going to deal with one last issue, and that is an issue I have and have had with the some pro-life leaders, others, and I'm not going to name names. I don't know their hearts. I can't tell
Mhm.
the motivations behind this. But I think with the overturning of Roe versus Wade, it's going to get real. As Joe Biden has said, it's going to get real, meaning we are now no longer in some kind of theoretical legal landscape. We know what it looks like. Now, state legislatures can move to outlaw abortion, restrict it severely. And it's really going to put our words to the test. Are we going to do what we've said we wanted to do for 50 years? Are we actually going to do it now?
Mhm.
And I've already seen some concerns amongst some of our pro-life friends. Governor, I think it's Hutchison in Oklahoma, has already said he wants to put rape and incest exceptions in a bill that banned abortion altogether. There are indications that we're try to smooth out some of our rhetoric. And I think you would agree with this that there are legislators, there are politicians who they'll campaign as a pro-lifer in order to get the pro-life vote, but when it comes down to it, they really don't want to end it. And I
Yep.
think that we're going to find out who those people are.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were satisfied with that up until this point. But now it all changes, and I for one am thankful that Roe's out of the way, so the veil can be pulled back. That no
Yeah.
longer can we as pro-lifers use Roe v. Wade
Yeah.
as an excuse. I never have.
Yeah.
I've never said we needed to bend the knee to Roe. I've never said we need to make our laws to comply with Roe v. Wade. I would
Mhm.
support some of those on the way to ending it, but I was
Mhm.
always saying, let's challenge it, let's defy it, let's do everything we can so we don't recognize it. But now that it likely is going to be out of the way, this becomes a reality.
Yeah.
And I want you to speak to that. And I'm not broad brushing here. I can't even name names, but we're going to find out who's serious about this and who's not.
Oh, absolutely. I think the vast majority of the pro-life movement, pro-life advocates are very sincere and want to ban abortion. But a lot of the
Right.
pro-life politicians, I am not convinced. While many of them I think are sincere, not all of them are. Frankly, a pro-life politician's um, biggest goal too often is not to save the baby, it's to save their political career. And
Mhm.
oftentimes, I think when they're going to have the opportunity to ban abortion with zero exceptions, I think we're going to see, frankly, a lot of people reveal who they are. A lot of people are going to say, "Well, yeah, I might have a lot of support from pro-life people on this, but this could hurt my political career." And I think we're going to see, sadly, a lot of people showing their true colors. But
Well, and,
hopefully,
and to them, I say primary them. I mean, if they're not ready to outlaw abortion altogether, primary them. I mean, run
yeah,
candidates against them to defeat them. I mean, that's
yeah,
where we're at. We're no
yeah,
longer going to settle for this to play under the rubric of Roe v. Wade. And so,
yeah.
yeah, you're right. I think people are going to show their true colors. We'll get behind the ones that have been consistent in their
Mhm.
political careers and those that are wavering on all of this. It's time to run candidates that want to end it all. So I think that's the exhortation I have to our pro-life friends. My guest
Mhm.
has been Samuel Sey, and you can go to his website at slowtowrite.com. He has a recent blog post called Why I'm Not an Abolitionist on Abortion. I exhort you to read that. Samuel will be speaking at our Day of Action here in Columbus on June 23 and 24. You can find out more about that by going to createdequal.org. Samuel, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much, sir. It's truly an honor.
I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. We'll see you next time. God bless you. God bless America. And remember, America, to bless God.
You've been listening to Mark Harrington, your radio activist. For more information on how to make a difference for the cause of life, liberty, and justice, go to createdequal.org. To follow Mark, go to markharringtonshow.com. Be sure to tune in next time for your marching orders in the culture war.